I already made a video on this channel talking about the connection between Gecko Moria and Imu. But today I thought about something else, and the Imu and the Gecko Moria connection striked once again. Before we start, leave a like and subscribe, and let's get into it. And this all started because I was thinking that in past chapters we have seen that Blackbeard kidnapped Moria, is now holding him hostage at Achinosu. Not only he kidnapped Moria, he also kidnapped some of his underlings, and even offed Absalom, the dude with the lion mouth, that had the invisibility fruit, and then he transferred the invisibility fruit power into Shiryu of the Rain that was locked in Impel Down. But for some reason, Blackbeard kept Moria alive. And that's very important on itself, and because it opposes other moments in the story. For an example, in Marineford, when Don Flamingo was ordered by somebody up in the government to take Moria off of the One Piece server. And that is very important on itself as well. I'm gonna dive a bit deeper into it later in the video. We also knew that Rox, Blackbeard's father, was missing a special something in order to even engage Imu in battle. Also, Imu knew that, so it's not something. It's not like Imu has a weakness that he's not even aware of. He knows that Rox was missing something as well, so he knows what it is, and Rox knew what it is as well. And another main point of this connection is Thriller Bark itself, and like I said in the other video, the freezer, because so far we only have seen two real freezers in the One Piece world. Moria, where he stored ores, and Imu's, where he stores the gigantic straw hat. We already have here a lot of connections between Moria and Imu, let's get deeper into them. I also mentioned this part in my other video, the freezers in One Piece, but it's very important to go through it again to understand the importance and the nuance of Don Flamingo being ordered to take Moria from the One Piece server, because that was done in secret, so nobody else knew, and the fact that Don Flamingo was the one tasked to do so is very important, because he was an ex-Celestial Dragon, and he knows about the holy treasure in Marihuana. That could be Imu, could be the Straw Hat, could be Imu's powers, we don't really know. But the important part is whoever ordered Don Flamingo to do that, they didn't need to share any additional information because Don Flamingo already knew it. So if they had to task somebody else with that mission, they would have to share some sensible information to somebody else that was not a celestial dragon and that didn't already knew that holy treasure information, so they'll be spreading the sensible information to unnecessary sources. And then it's also weird because at the time, Moria and Don Flamingo were on the same team. They were both serving the government as 7 warlords of the sea. So it's not like Moria was an enemy to the government. Actually, he was working, he was an ally to the government, although it's more like being used. Concluding this part, there was in one side the government, they want Moria off the One Piece server, if you know what I'm saying, and then we have Blackbeard that want him alive. And the reason why Blackbeard wanted Moria alive might be really, really important. Maybe because he knew what Rox knew as well. So Blackbeard knows what is necessary to even just engage Imu in battle. And maybe that's why he wants to keep Moria alive. Because maybe Moria has some information, some know-how, or its literal shadow fruit powers are the key, or some way somehow connect to the key to get information or a weapon to directly counter Imu. On the other side, we have to ask why the government wanted Moria deleted from the One Piece server. In my opinion, it's because of not only Moria's power, but Moria himself. Because Moria was first a very strong pirate, that's why he became a part of the Chichibukai, because the government could not deal with Moria on its own, it was too expensive and would cause too much damage. So the government decided to place Moria under their control. And also, Moria's power, the Shadow Fruit, is really, really powerful and important for the story as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But what happened? What shifted? What was the difference? So Moria was an ally working for the government, and then no, you have to go. You're not good for us anymore. So maybe it was just because Moria fell off. Moria became lazy, and Moria was defeated by Luffy. But before that, he stood his ground against Kaido. Maybe that was one of the reasons that made the government collect Moria under their wing, and then they were like, okay, you lost to Luffy, you became lazy, you having that power is a liability to the government in terms of information or in terms of the shadow power itself. And going from that perspective, we have two avenues which Moria can influence the government or Imu directly and indirectly. Directly, the Shadow fruit power. Imu looks like a shadow sometimes, especially in the most recent One Piece chapter, where Imu has literally a shadowy form after he possesses Saint Saturn, and then he takes 9, I think, named attacks from very powerful One Piece characters, and it's not like he survives or he withstood them, he's not even phased by it. The attacks just go through Imu. That's very shadowy like. And even Rocks cuts through Imu, and it's just like he's cutting a shadow, literally. So maybe Moria can cancel, manipulate, or interfere somehow with Imu's abyss power. Then we have, I think, which is really the connection here, is the indirect way that Moria can influence others to be able to defeat Imu, which is information. So Moria has a very specific type of ship, Thriller Bark, which is not really a ship, it's a floating island. There are a lot of theories, not yet confirmed, that that piece of island that Moria calls home is actually part of God's Valley. Maybe a part of the mountain that fell off in the most recent chapter, we don't know. And more than that, a lot, and perhaps the most powerful crew members of Moria, members of Moria's zombie army, are ex-Rocks pirates that maybe died and their bodies were left behind on Thriller Bark, and then Moria, using his powers, shadows into the bodies, made those very, very powerful soldiers for his zombie army. So that can conclude is that Moria knows about God Valley, and that Moria knows something that we still don't know, and I think nobody else in the story knows, but the government knows that Moria knows something. That's why they told Don Flamingo that already knows that thing to go and take care of Moria and not anybody else because they will need to share that information. And going back to Moria's powers, I think there is the possibility, perhaps not very likely, and that is in the story of One Piece, which is a very interesting one as well, that Imu is a shadow. Like Moria took Luffy's shadow and placed it into Or's body. For a short while, the shadow maintained its personality of Luffy. Slowly but surely, it started losing its personality. So, two scenarios can be possible here. Imu's shadow was so powerful that it maintained its personality, or Imu is the body that got, maybe, that's a very popular theory, the shadow, or in some other way, the essence, the memory of Nefertari Lily. And that will kind of make sense because the only way to defeat Imu then would be Salt, if he's the zombie, and he enters in contact with Salt, it would cancel the Shadow Fruit power, and the shadow that is giving Imu's life would go away, or somebody else with the shadow power will be able to take the shadow away, being a menace to Imu. To conclude this connection video between Imu and Gecko Moria, I believe that Blackbeard holding Moria as a hostage alive is important because he could have just offed him at any moment and give or obtain his Shadow Fruit's power, but he kept him alive because there is the possibility that Moria information or Devil Fruit power, or even his lineage, since he seems related to Kaido and the ancient giants, and Imu sees the giants and their lineage as a perfect usable army for his cause, but either the information, the power, or the lineage are one of the things that Rocks needed to engage in battle with Imu, and maybe the Shadow Fruit is one of the two legendary fruits that Rocks was looking for, one of them being the Elbaf legendary fruit, and the other one being the Shadow Fruit because it could cut the shadow from Imu's body, if Emo is a zombie, or it could interfere, stop, or manipulate Emu's abyss power, or maybe the shadow fruit is the connection of Emu's abyss power, or they share that abyss, they share the source of their power. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications, and I'll see you on the next one.